Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Elizabeth Taylor, and I am General Counsel for the State Board of Education, and I will be presiding over this rulemaking hearing on behalf of the Tennessee State Board of Education. At the last State Board of Education regular meeting, which was held on July 22nd, 2016, the State Board voted to approve on first reading a measure that presented revisions to the Special Education Programs and Services Rule. The State Board last reviewed and updated the Special Education Programs and Services Rule in 2008. The Tennessee Department of Education Special Populations Division requested a review to address updates related to disability disorders and assessment practices that have occurred over the past 8 years. A task force consisted of special education supervisors, school psychologists, speech and language pathologists, representatives of parents, advocates, vision specialists, hearing specialists, preschool specialists, and other stakeholders convened on March 15th to address guidelines and standards for disability categories in addition to the definitions. At that first meeting, the task force determined whether the disability definitions, guidelines, and standards should be amended. After identifying possible needs, the task force created committees to research and recommend changes for each indicated category. Recommendations were provided to the task force in April 2016 and were also sent out to stakeholder groups for feedback. Further revisions were made after reviewing all feedback with task force committee groups for each disability. With this new rule, the following proposed revisions are better aligned to update clinical disability definitions and best practices, which allow for improved portability between states regarding eligibility. And I'll go through the revisions to the rule as they were presented to the State Board at that last board meeting. The first one was the update to the TDOE special education website address. There was a portion on page 1 that clarified federal law code reference. The autism definition was updated to include language that was consistent with current diagnostic criteria and features of autism. Developmental delay definition revision was revised to include a breakdown of physical developmental delays and to provide consistency of categorical use across the state. Emotional disturbance revision clarified the rule-out statement. Intellectually gifted definition was revised and clarified adverse need and includes a statement regarding underrepresented youth. Orthopedic impairment definition to include clarifying statement, but not limited to. Speech or language impairment inclusion and rule out statements revisions to reflect current best practice consistent with the American Speech, Language, and Hearing Association. And vision impairment inclusion statement revisions in the area of low vision impairment to reflect consistency with common understanding of low vision and vision impairment practices. We anticipate that these revisions will be presented to the State Board for final reading at their January 2017 meeting. The feedback from this hearing will be used by the department in considering further revisions and be made available to the State Board for their consideration before they vote on the item. If the Board approves the item, the next step in the promulgation process is approval by the State Attorney General's Office and the Secretary of State. The Joint Government Operations Committee of the Legislature will also hold a hearing on the rule changes before voting on whether it will be included in the rules omnibus bill. Now I will open the floor for questions and answers and public comments. And I just wanted to note, while this is a rulemaking hearing specifically to address the revisions to the Special Education Programs and Services Rule, based on comments that I've received in my office and that I'm sure the department has received as well, many people may also have comments regarding the standards for special education evaluation and eligibility. Therefore, during the public comment portion, please state your name and organizational affiliation, if any, whether you are commenting on the rules, the standards, or both before making your comments. Joanna Bivens, Evaluation Services Coordinator in the Office of Special Populations at the Department of Education, and other department representatives may answer any questions. Please remember to make your comments brief to allow time for as many individuals to comment as possible. And when commenting, we are recording this. I would ask that you stand kind of right here towards those tables so that we can pick you up and make sure that we get you commented. So I have a list here, and don't worry if you came in and haven't had a chance to sign up. Once we get to the list, I'll ask anyone else that wishes to comment that didn't have a chance to sign up, and they can do so at that time. So the first person I have to comment is Jacqueline. Please forgive me if I mispronounce your last name. Yude.
The second one, you got it.
Yude.
Hey guys, my name is Jackie Yude. I'm the president of the Tennessee Association of Audiologists and Speech Language Pathologists. We have a couple of comments on the rule. In section 3B, where it's manifested by at least two of the following, we ask that you ensure this is consistent with the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Number 2, in section 10, children identified as intellectually gifted are exempted from the discipline procedures at. We ask that you consider what discipline procedures will be used for the intellectually gifted. Point 3, section 16B, line 3, significant atypical production. Please consider clarifying what qualifies as significant, or consider noting this is at the therapist's discretion. And our final comment, section 18A2, the changes from 2050 to 2070 vision. Please gain feedback from any vision specialist to ensure this is an appropriate change and is not excluding those who need to be included. And that summarizes our comments.
Thank you so much for your comments. Next, I have Beth Cruz. Yeah, let's go.
Hi, I'm Beth Cruz. I'm an attorney with the Education Rights Project in the Metropolitan Nashville Public Defender's Office. And I'm also representing the Disability Coalition of Education, and a disability advocacy organization composed of family members, advocates, and others advocating for high-quality educational opportunities. Both of our organizations' comments center around the emotional disturbance criteria today. I will be addressing some of our concerns, and my colleague Carrie Mason will address the remainder. On the whole, we're asking the State Board of Education to align the definition of emotional disturbance with the federal definition. In the situations in which it has deviated or has further explained, in practice, we have seen that the state standard has been having the effect of delaying or denying evaluation and sometimes denying eligibility to students who would otherwise have been eligible under the federal standard. In our practice, we have found that these provisions have had a disproportionate effect on students who live in poverty, given their higher risk for mental health challenges than their higher resource peers. So our first request is in the definition. I'm addressing both the rules and the standards, that the documentation requirement for informal assessments and interventions be removed. Our concern there is that this requirement has led to a delay in evaluation, violating child find. And that on the whole, this has made the state definition less protective than the federal definition. The second concern with that language is the quality of interventions. By allowing informal interventions, it doesn't align well with the IDEA's requirement that to the extent practicable, research-based interventions are used. So we have concern there as well, that this waters down the federal requirement. Our next comment has to do with letter A under the definition. The inability to learn which cannot be explained by limited cultural experience or limited school experience. Those two phrases are added as compared to the federal definition. Our concern is that school avoidance is often caused by an emotional disturbance. Depression or anxiety related to school keeps children sometimes from attending school. In our practice, we've had clients been denied eligibility for services as a child with an emotional disturbance because they have not attended school, and that lack of attendance has been directly related to their mental health diagnoses. Our next comment concerns letter C. We also ask that this more closely mirror the federal standard. Currently, the state language says inappropriate types of behaviors or feelings under when there are no major or unusual stressors evident. Again, our concern there is that children who live in poverty are regularly experiencing what we might consider to be major stressors in their lives, including homelessness, violence, or parental separation. The federal language of under normal circumstances is more inclusive, and our current language places an excessive burden on those children who are experiencing those stressors, and in practice we have seen that used as a means for denying service. And then finally, my final comment revolves around the extended time period in the evaluation procedures that is used to assess. We urge the board to consider allowing a shorter length of time in 2 cases. One, when the severity of disability results in risk to harm to self or others, and then the second, when the student's behavior results in harm to their educational opportunity through school exclusion like suspensions, expulsions, or referral to juvenile justice. I'll just mention briefly a recent study in Florida found that 3 suspensions in the 9th grade led to a 49% chance that that student would drop out of high school. So the harm is tremendous when students, due to their mental health challenges, are excluded from school. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Carrie Mason.
Hi, I'm Carrie Mason. I am an attorney with the Education Rights Project. I'm also the Metro Guardian ad litem. We're here today representing the Ed Rights Project and also the Disability Coalition on Education. The first issue I'd like to address with comment on the rules is the special education eligibility label for emotional disturbance. While we generally believe that eligibility should be, Tennessee eligibility should be aligned with the federal definition. In the case of the ED label, we do think that there is a good reason to deviate. At DCE and Ed Rights, we'd like to see emotional disturbance changed to emotional disability. I was a special education classroom teacher for 5 years, and in that time, I got to know many kids who moved around. I had one student named Shernita who lived in several different states, and she came to me one day and asked me, why am I emotionally disturbed in one state while I have an emotional disability in another state? She said to me, Ms. Mason, I'm not disturbed. I have some disabilities. I have issues I'm working on, but I'm not disturbed. And I'll tell you what I told her, and that's I couldn't agree more. I think that the language for ED is stigmatizing and demoralizing, and it's time we join 20 other states in changing that label from emotional disturbance and align and eventually hopefully become the majority on that language and help pave the way for better language at the federal level for the sake of our kids. We're also gravely concerned about the revised language for social maladjustment in the ED definition, and that's also in the rules, and that's the second issue that I wanted to talk about. The federal law indicates that children who meet at least 1 of 5 criteria can be identified ED. Under the federal law, the identification does not apply to children who are socially maladjusted unless it is also determined that that child has ED. The federal language is such that many states do not use the clause to exclude children. Indeed, Wisconsin no longer uses the social maladjustment clause in their eligibility criteria at all. And Colorado provides guidance to its LEAs indicating that social maladjustment can and does occur with emotional disturbance. The National Association of School Psychologists takes the same position. In contrast, Tennessee's proposed definition indicates that a child cannot be identified as ED if social maladjustment is the primary cause of atypical behavior associated with emotional disturbance. My question is how will school psychologists know the difference between social maladjustment as the primary cause for ED behaviors or whether it's due to something else? From practice, I can tell you what school psychologists look for to determine whether there's an underlying emotional disability or a social maladjustment is an identification, a diagnosis by a mental health professional. The truth is, our kids that are living in poverty have such a reduced access to mental health services in the community. They have reduced access to competent diagnosis and competent treatment. There's a lot of kids that just can't get those diagnoses, and their parents can't bring those diagnoses to the team. And I worry that the social maladjustment language will end up preventing those children from ED eligibility by nature of their poverty. I ask you, are we using the Tennessee rules to discriminate against Tennessee's most resourceless children? I'm afraid by not tracking to the federal definition, that's exactly what's going to happen in Tennessee. I implore the State Department of Education to consider our most resourceless kids and eliminate the language under social maladjustment that isn't found in the federal definition. I think the language makes Tennessee eligibility criteria more restrictive than the federal definition, and that's problematic ethically and constitutionally. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Kim Jennings.
Good morning. I feel weird. I'm just gonna stay right here. My name is Kim Jennings, and I'm the gifted coordinator at Aspire Memphis. This is my 11th year in education, my 8th year in gifted education. I also have my master's degree in gifted education, and I'm continuing with my doctorate. I represent Aspire Memphis, which is a Title I school where 95% of my students receive free or reduced lunch. I would like to start off with a few quotes from the students about GATE, Gifted Academically Talented Education is what we call it. I enjoy Math Counts, which is a competition. I also enjoy critical thinking puzzles. Ms. Jennings also helps us with our working class. It gives me a chance to work at my own pace, and I can't be distracted. GATE is a place where I feel loved and safe. It is a great learning program that has been pushing me for 4 years. I hope that GATE is where I can be for all the years that I am in school. My favorite part of GATE is that I get to go learn about things not just happening around me. I get to learn about art, music, pop culture, and the world. When you are in GATE, you learn the process of learning how to become a better student. When I am done with my classwork, I get to come work with other students who understand me. When your brain is done growing and you get to rest your mind, you get to do fun, creative stuff and learn some stuff too. As you can tell, the students from Aspire truly benefit and love receiving gifted services in the classroom. It also helps them reach their true potential. If the new IQ score is passed, 60% of my students will not receive GATE services. And that's pretty alarming. So I'm asking you to please consider looking at all of the underrepresented populations and students and schools when you're looking at this proposed IQ score change. If it does pass, please also think of the assessments that are tied to IQ scores. The other day I was doing a STEM project with my students and we were building a hammock. And this is the top tier students in my school, and I had half the class not know what a hammock was. So if a hammock shows up on an IQ test, does that tell that my students aren't as intelligent? I don't think so. So please, if this does pass, look at how this is going to affect students from very underrepresented populations on a service that they truly do love. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Paulette Gentry.
Good morning. I'm Paulette Gentry, speech and language pathologist, past president of the Tennessee Association of Audiologists and Speech Language Pathologists, past president of the Council of State Association Presidents. I am currently employed with Metro National Public Schools as a working speech pathologist. I'm going to address the standards. One of our major concerns is that including the speech language school speech language teachers and a licensed speech language therapist as evaluators is not under their job description. They are to be supervised by a certified speech language pathologist who holds a PSSP license from the State Board of Education here in Tennessee. Next one is when you use language of an AAC specialist, there is no definition. All speech and language pathologists are certified and well trained if they are carrying the PSSP license to do an evaluation in augmentative alternative communication. Augmentative alternative communication evaluation for nonverbal children, that's written in the standards. That is done by all competent and well-meaning speech and language pathologists. That is part of their protocol. They are trained to be able to successfully and competently evaluate any child who has a nonverbal mode of communication. Language evaluation in the standards refers to a comprehensive evaluation in expressive skills and also in receptive skills. It does not address that comprehensive language competency, which is a combination of both receptive and expressive language skills. Our fear is individuals may use one standard measure in either expressive or receptive language skills to determine eligibility. I do not believe that that is what the federal or the state guidelines is recommending. We are looking for a total comprehensive language estimation of abilities. Under articulation, the language refers to a phonological process. We need that clarified. That is an ambiguous term in our profession. In articulation, the language states attracts adverse attention. That is very broad and subjective. Further definition of that would be necessary. The last one is throughout all of the standards, there is always a statement that includes results of standardized assessment and educational impact. I understand how the federal and the state law is written. None of the assessments in speech and language pathology were ever designed to measure educational impact. It is a two-pronged definition and it is a two-pronged determination. I feel that it needs to be very, very defined in that we're looking at what standard assessment tools were designed to measure skills and then look at an educational impact, because none of the assessment tools were ever designed to measure educational impact. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Gentry. Ms. Gentry was the last person that I have that indicated that they wish to comment. However, I know some people came in late. I understand Nashville traffic, the parking situation downtown. I get it. So if there's anybody who did not get a chance to sign up but that does wish to comment, feel free to come forward. Again, that I just ask that you state your name, your affiliation with any organization, and if any, and whether you're commenting on the proposed rule, the standards change, or both. So if there's anyone that did not get a chance to sign up but wishes to comment, and if you just stand right there. Thanks.
Okay.
You can back up, like right where you are is perfect. Yes.
Make my comments?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Sarah Strang. I'm from Hamilton County Department of Education in Chattanooga, and I'm here to comment on the intellectually gifted criteria, the proposed changes. I feel like having the minimum standard at 123 will eliminate a lot of our underrepresented populations. Since we're IQ testing, I don't believe that a lot of the IQ measures, the language required and everything is not good for ELL populations and minority populations. A large population of our underrepresented eligible gifted students are in the 118 to 122 IQ range. I feel like that if we go back to where we were back here, you know, many years ago where the IQ was 130, and then we went through an OCR investigation in our county, and I feel like by doing this we'll go back to that, and we'll have to start all over again at square one, and you know, and then we'll have to come up with new criteria, and not only will that be a lot of work for people involved in this, but we'll miss a lot of gifted children that need services. We should be for kids providing services to those gifted children who need it. And if we're just looking at scores to do this, then that's going to eliminate that population.
Thank you.
I've got some graphs available here that tells the population that we have looked at in the ranges, and this shows that a lot of our kids that are underrepresented by race, how many were in that range. So
Okay.
I'm going to submit these to you all.
Thank you. We thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
You may come forward.
I'm Anna Cottle, and I'm here on behalf of Post-Adoption Learning Services, an advocacy group that advocates for the unique educational and behavioral needs of internationally adopted children. And I appreciate the department's interest in revising evaluation and eligibility standards, particularly in addressing the misidentification and disproportionate overrepresentation and underrepresentation of students on the basis of cultural, linguistic, and environmental factors within the proposed revisions. We strongly support the proposed revisions in general, as they're intended to improve state and district efforts to provide timely and appropriate evaluations and eligibility decisions. It's worth noting that owing to the intersectionality of children with disabilities who are also in foster care or otherwise wards of the state, or who have been domestically adopted, many of our recommendations will advance civil rights for these populations as well. No current data is available on the numbers of international adoptees nationwide receiving special education and services under the IDEA. But there is, according to the 2000 census, a 7.8% rate of disability compared to a 5% rate of disability among the overall population. As we consider the proposed revisions, it's important to note the legislative intent explicitly communicated by the U.S. Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions in Senate Report 108-185. They addressed at length the unique educational needs of international adoptees, insisting that exclusionary factors designed to prevent disproportionate representation of students under Section 614B5 should not be used to deny services to children with disabilities simply because they were born in a foreign country and not exposed to English instruction, because they have experienced institutionalization or were born into disadvantaged circumstances. The committee cautioned against requiring that international adoptees, quote, wait long periods of time before going through the IDEA evaluation process on the mistaken assumption that the child's not familiar enough with English to receive an appropriate evaluation, end quote. They also noted, quote, that some foreign-born adopted children are refused services even after testing shows evidence of disability simply because of mistaken assumption that such disabilities are simply from a lack of English proficiency, encouraging schools, quote, to recognize the difference between language acquisition in ESL students and language acquisition for foreign-born adopted children, end quote. So, with that in mind as we look at the revisions, our general recommendation, first of all, would be to request a definition for sources of information sensitive to cultural, linguistic, and environmental factors across all categories of evaluation procedures, so as not to disproportionately exclude foreign-born adopted children from eligibility for special education and related services. Under functional delay, Section C in that definition in the 2014 special education framework used intellectual disability, and that somehow was replaced with mental retardation, which is a less current or an outdated term in the revised language. I assume that's one of those cut and paste moments. Under emotional disturbance, because of the high incidence of behavioral disorders among international adoptees, we request either revision of the language in Section A of the definition to remove, quote, limited school experience, comma, cultural differences, end quote, or to read, quote, inability to learn which cannot be explained by limited school experience, cultural factors, or intellectual, sensory, or health factors, except when those factors are present as a result of early institutionalization, end quote, or to read, quote, inability to learn which cannot be explained by limited school experience, cultural differences, or intellectual, sensory, or health factors, except where those factors are present as a result of trauma, abuse, and or neglect. Under specific learning disability, we ask for clarification about Section A under evaluation procedures. Section A2, second paragraph reads, quote, in the case of a student who's in placement outside of a local education agency, a team member must observe the student in an environment appropriate for a student of that age, end quote. In absence of RTI within private school settings, we ask how Section A1 will be carried out to ensure that foreign-born adopted children and their American-born peers who are placed in private schools, whether unilaterally or by the LEA, have equal access to evaluation for disability which satisfies child find and assesses all areas, whether or not commonly linked to the SLD being considered, and provides an eligibility determination regarding the SLD being considered. We note that the removal of the paragraphs, of several paragraphs from the 2014 Special Education Framework are really significant for international adoptees, as they allow for delivery of RTI models and initial eligibility determinations within appropriate timelines under IDEA. The removal also allows for students to receive initial evaluations that are appropriately broad to assess all areas, whether or not commonly linked to the disability category being considered, by virtue of not being restricted to the area of suspected disability. So we laud the department's efforts in that direction. This revision also removes some of the barriers that would otherwise prevent international adoptees from receiving evaluations equal to those given to their American-born native English-speaking peers suspected of disability, thus advancing the civil rights of the internationally adopted children in this area. Under speech or language impairment, we request the revision of the definition to read, quote, identified speech and or language deficiencies cannot be attributed to characteristics of second language acquisition except in the case of foreign-born adopted children. This language, end quote, this language would align with concerns expressed by the Senate Help Committee in Senate Report 108-185. It would also align with the American Speech Language Hearing Association and their substantial findings regarding the language acquisition considerations for international adoptees, and guidance in their policy document titled Clinical Management of Communicatively Handicapped Minority Language Populations. So, I don't have a letter. I'll give you a copy of my letter because that was a lot. And thank you so much
Thank you
for the opportunity to comment on these revisions.
Is there anyone else that wishes to speak?
First of all, I'd like to say thank you for the opportunity to address you. My name is Lynn Howard. I'm a past president of the Tennessee Association for the Gifted, and I am a retired employee of the Hamilton County Schools. For 15 years, I was a classroom teacher of gifted students, and for 15 years, I was the lead teacher for gifted services in Hamilton County. I was working in the field of gifted education during and before, during, and after the OCR investigation that covered the whole southeastern United States. I'm very well aware of the problems that existed before that investigation, how that investigation went, and the very concerted effort to change the problems that were uncovered by that OCR investigation. I sat on the committee at the State Department to discuss gifted education remaining in special education. I sat on the committee in the State Department that revised the criteria based on the OCR investigation, and I sat on the committee that did the second revision for the criteria. I'm deeply concerned about the proposed changes for intellectually gifted. Those changes were targeted so that we could find and serve underrepresented populations. There was a great deal of grounding in research, the research of Turkheimer and the effect of poverty on underrepresented populations in particular was noted. At the time, we didn't have the research by Aronson, but that is more recent research on stereotype threat that also impacts the evaluation of underrepresented populations. And I believe that the change in the IQ standard will adversely affect underrepresented populations far more than the other populations. I do understand the reason behind the wish to change the IQ standard. It is, oh, we've got too many kids now. We've got a higher percentage than we ought to have. But already in the standard, is the second prong of eligibility. And if local education agencies and the State Department would be more tough on that second prong of eligibility, that would solve the problem. We don't need to change the IQ standard. We need to enforce the second prong of eligibility. I guess in the final discussion of my point, Hamilton County worked very, very hard over the last 15 years to design a program of Child Find that was fair and equitable for underrepresented populations. And we were, in that time, able to make a dramatic improvement in finding, making eligible, and serving kids from underrepresented populations. I see this change as a step way backwards that will just absolutely put us in a place that we don't want to be. I see, more than anything else, I see many, many children who will not have the advantage that they have now. I could give many anecdotal tales about what being identified and receiving services has meant for some of our children over the last few years, including parents who thought, oh, my kid can go to college, to kids who suddenly believed in themselves. This is too important to be taken without a deep delve into some research. And I would like to encourage the department to take a look at the underrepresented kids who are on eligibility in the state now and make some decisions in a very research-based manner. And I thank you very much for the opportunity to address you.
Thank you.
So good morning. Thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Fayaz Ahmed, and I'm a professor at MTSU in the Concrete Industry Management Department, but more importantly, a parent of a Spectrum child at Siegel High School. As a professor, my challenge is to get students to be excited about education and learning. And so anytime I can give them extra encouragement to say, hey, look, I'll spend extra time with you, you can see the light bulb coming on and then them jumping in and taking that opportunity and excelling. So to me, this increase in the standard should be looked at from the point of view of conducting research and saying, what would happen, what has happened to the students who have been in the 5-point range right now, there's acceptable standard, and how successful have they been, right? If they've been successful, then what is the point of raising the standard? But if they've not been successful, then there should be ways for us at the school and the state level to say, this is not working out for the student, let's kick them out of here. But to raise the standard without having some significant research done into this does not make a lot of sense to me as a professor, first of all, and also as a father. So when I read this, I was like, what is the reason behind it? Obviously, resources is one of them, right? You have too many people in it. But is that really the solution to working with the resources or limitation of resources to get rid of some of the students who could really benefit from this? I don't think so. But I think this is an opportunity for us to really look at it and do some research, conduct some research and identify, have the students who are on the cusp of being eliminated from this program, have they really benefit from this? And if they have benefit from it, then we should look at it from their perspective and say, wait a minute, we need to kind of reconsider what we are planning on doing. That's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Anyone else?
My name is Lori Whitney, and I am co-president of the Tennessee Association for the Gifted, along with Tara Strang, who spoke earlier. And I just want to reiterate that we've talked amongst ourselves as a board about the issues that this will cause for underrepresented populations, English language learners, kids in poverty situations, and the negative impact that it will have across the state on those populations. And we highly encourage you to look, again, as many people have said, at research and whether or not these populations are being served and the potential impact that these changes will have on those students and their access to the services that they need, probably more than the other kids who will continue to be served.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Winterbrook. I'm a doctoral candidate in gifted education at the University of Denver. I'm currently a gifted specialist at Murfreesboro City Schools. I spent the last 2 years in Williamson County Schools as a gifted teacher at elementary and middle school level. And in Murfreesboro City Schools, I chose to go from Williamson County to Murfreesboro City to work with underrepresented populations of students. And I just wanted to say that, yes, we're feeling the same impact that this could show for our underrepresented populations as well. And that we are concerned if we change the IQ, but I also have some additional concerns. One of my concerns coming from Colorado into Tennessee is how we only identify the intellectual giftedness. And I think we need to look at that talent development. The National Association of Gifted Children has worked hard to develop programming standards and a definition. And I think that we are missing, especially I was really surprised coming to Nashville in that we don't focus on creativity. We don't focus on any form of talent development. And in Colorado, they have 5 areas that they identify instead of only one area. So they're specific academic, which really makes sense to me because not all children are good at all things across the board. And many have a lot of gifts in science or social studies. But they also look at talent, like leadership abilities, which one of our schools in Murfreesboro City Schools is a Leader in Need program. And for children in poverty, finding that leadership ability and supporting that can be huge for them. But then the performing arts, the visual arts, that is huge for many creative individuals, and to limit only identifying intellectual and not looking at the talent portion. And I know some programs have. I'll say Colorado has worked really hard on portability. So every district in the state is identifying gifted education the same way, and they're working to serve their needs the same way. So at least if those children move, which we're in a very mobile society, they know they have the same criteria for identification, they're receiving the same services. And now being in 2 districts, I have recognized that if my student leaves and goes to Memphis, or they go to Hamilton County, or even just to Williamson County, those services could look very different, and identification could. So I would even challenge us to look at definitions, to look at identification, and even try to develop that universal portability to better serve our students. And the last thing I want to suggest is not only looking at IQ. In Colorado, it was very successful. We did COGAT 2nd grade screeners across the state, 4th grade screeners across the state. So anyone we is not referred by a teacher or a parent, or we have very few self-referrals, unfortunately, we can capture them. So we can definitely catch those underrepresented populations.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Susan Moran, and I'll give you, well, first let me tell you a story. Last night, I got a phone call from my daughter, who is a junior in college right now, and she said, Mom, I was just really stressed about something, and I was really stressed about it because it was making me more stressed because sometimes I just can't control my brain, and it does things that I don't want it to do, and I can't reel it back in. This is my daughter. She said, I immediately went out, and I remembered some things that we talked about in gifted education, and I bought 2 books about being a gifted adult because I need to understand what's going on. I have 2 children of my own who are identified as gifted. the daughter that I just mentioned, and also I have a son right now in 2nd grade. I know why it rings. But they, because of them, I have become a champion for gifted education. I'm a gifted specialist now in a private school. I've taught in Rutherford County as a gifted teacher. And I believe passionately that the children that we have in gifted education belong in gifted education. I also believe that we're not doing enough to identify children who aren't being identified. I am a minority, my children are minorities, and if the range were where you are proposing, my daughter who called me last night would not qualify for gifted education. And I know that she belongs here, and I know that she is, she's done, straight A, all the things. Leadership, someone spoke about talent, all of that. She has all of the creativity, but we would be eliminating students who deserve these services and who are benefiting from these services. I also teach, in my own school, I teach grades 3 through 5 gifted education, and these children just deserve to be here. And I agree with the statements that have been made about how the state needs to provide more support for gifted education and not find ways to diminish it or to take these services away. These are services that are critical, and this is a very, very important issue. It's represented by all of the people who are passionate about this issue and here to speak about it today. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak that has not done so?
My name is Jeanette James. I'm a stay-at-home mom. And I'm here to talk about the gifted reassessment of things, IQ changes. I have 2 children in the program, one in high school, one in middle school. I have actually lived near the Jackson area, and that's where they were identified, and then moved to the Rutherford County area. So I've actually worked in 2 different groups, and I love the idea of standardizing or coming up with the whole program of every different services being the same when you move. Also increasing to the creativity, the talents and everything, as well as the academic, because so much of it goes hand in hand. Not everybody's good at everything, but sometimes, music goes greatly with academics and art as well. So, and I know there's just a few things. I want to read from the Tennessee Department of Education website. It says, we are dedicated to the goal of dramatically improving student achievement and committed to the belief that children from all backgrounds can succeed when given the opportunities they deserve. They have 3 key beliefs that undergird our work. Build an effective state agency that serves a delivery system to districts, support policies that remove bureaucracy and unleash innovation, and operate from an ethos of continuous improvement through measurement at every level. And I really feel like changing that IQ undermines so much of what you say you're about. And I know that one of my children would have been eliminated with these changes that you're proposing. The other one would not. But both of them have thrived in the system, regardless of where we live. It brought so much to them, opened their eyes. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Sorry guys. So all the comments that were collected today, and to give the minutes I came for myself, but we have some recording and notes that we provided to the task force. We're meeting this coming Monday to review all written and comments received today at the public hearing. I think we're going to still be receiving some written comments for a while to make sure that anybody else has a chance to weigh in that would like to. And then we'll have any further discussions with the task force as needed based on comments received if they're of a different vein, or bring up an issue that we haven't addressed based on the comments we've received so far. And then I guess the next steps would be for those revisions to go to state board once all the revisions are made. Am I missing anything? Yes.
Speaking of those revisions being made, will there be access to those revisions before they go to the state board?
Once they are submitted to the state board, I believe they're posted on their agenda in advance of the meeting for anybody to review. So I'm not sure the time frame of that.
Usually it's about a month to 3 weeks before the board meeting on average.
So do we just need to set up a spy cam on the board agenda so we know we can get access to
Well, the next board meeting is set for, I think you're going to present in January. It's not going to be at the next one in October. We have quarterly board meetings. The next one is, I want to say January 27th. That could be wrong. But if you go to www.tn.gov/SBE, or you can just Google Tennessee State Board of Education, that's the easy way to get there. If you look on the upcoming meetings, it'll tell you when the January meeting will be, the exact date. So I would say maybe around the first week of January, check back to see if the agenda items have been posted.
And when the agenda item is posted, I'm sorry, I just want some clarification. Will we, all of us here, be able to actually access the revisions so that we can see exactly what is going to go?
No, we post a clean copy, but there's a cover sheet that will list the revisions that have been made. So it'll be a clean copy of the actual item, whether it's the rule or the standards, but on the cover sheet it will outline the changes that have been made between the first version and the second version. And at that point, you can submit comments to the board members directly. All of their contact information is on the state board website. So at that point, you can give your feedback directly to the board, or you can give it to me, Elizabeth.Taylor@tn.gov, and I can forward it on to the board for you. I've been receiving a lot of public comments, and we will continue to do so until November 1st in order to give them enough time to make revisions. So again, you can submit written comments, and written comments and oral comments are weighed equally. So if you have colleagues that weren't able to be here, you can be sure to tell them that they can continue to submit written comments to my email address. Again, that's Elizabeth.Taylor, Taylor, just like the movie star, at tn.gov. And then, as you guys know, we've been recording this, and I know there are people, because we're in Nashville, we're centralized, there are people across the state who would have liked to have been here but could not. They'll be able to access the recording and view the hearing, for their own personal benefit, and make comments based on what was said today, and just see, what has been discussed. So again, the next steps of the task force will consider all of the comments here today and the written comments that we have been receiving and will continue to receive. They'll prepare a final item to submit to the board for the January meeting, and the board will vote on that final item. Again, once the board votes on it, as far as the rule process goes, it'll then go to the Attorney General's office, to the Secretary of State, and to the Joint Government Operations Committee of the Legislature. If you have any questions about the rulemaking process, that's more what I do. I tell everyone I'm a lawyer. I'm not an educator. I'm not a special education person. But if you have any questions about the rulemaking process, I'd be happy to answer them. I know Misty had the last rulemaking hearing. Excuse me. Joanna and her team are willing to answer any specific questions that you might have about their process as well. So did everyone that wishes to speak get a chance to speak?
I just have one more thing. When it comes to the reevaluation process, in a couple of years, I have a couple students that will not qualify if the change is made. We can think about what our plan is for those students. But I have to all of a sudden go tell them, hey, you're not gifted anymore. So if we can look at that, that's a pretty big deal for my type of students too.
And that was my question. Is this going to be a retro, or is this going to be a new class? How do you decide who gets in or not based on their previous?
So from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I understand, if you're currently identified, that current identification stays active. There's a lot of changes for a lot of different disabilities, so it's kind of, you know, widespread. So we honor what was previously done. It's time for reevaluation. That's a consideration we talk about a little bit further. But the team comes together and looks at past testing and current performance mix decisions based on that. So, you know, how that all lays out, we'll keep working on those guidance. But current certification stays active. We don't anybody else. Yeah.
If I could just ask that, please. Again, coming from Colorado, it's a once identified, always identified state, and research indicates you don't lose your giftedness. And so it's a huge celebration in special education when a child doesn't need those services any longer. But when you exit a child from gifted services, it is, I mean, even in those 3-year evaluation, and most of the schools I've been in now, they do file reviews and don't exit them. But I have talked to quite a few colleagues now that did, and it's devastating, psychologically damaging for students who are told, oh, you were gifted, but sorry, you're no longer. It doesn't match research, and I think that's an area we need to reconsider in Tennessee if that's what we want to continue doing.
At the end of the day, we are all here for the benefit of the students. And do we want to scar a student because of 5 points based on all the factors that everybody has brought up? Or do we get better outcome by nurturing what we've been working on, and then really kind of focus our decision on research base as opposed to resource allocation? And that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing this is a purely resource allocation issue. You know, and the folks over here, more so than I am, are living their lives every day, making a difference in people's lives. And to me, it just makes really not a lot of sense from a business point of view, from education point of view. We need to be encompassing as opposed to raising the bar to see how many fall off and then work with only a few of them. It just makes no sense because we are here to provide education to the entire state of Tennessee. Considering where we stand in the national ranking, we've got to work harder, right? We've got to be more open and accepting to borderline cases.
I just want to speak to this, I'm sorry, I don't recall you, to Christine's discussion about exiting gifted services. I think that the second prong of eligibility in the state of Tennessee is extremely important in terms of gifted services. You know, in Hamilton County, what we tell parents is not having gifted services does not mean your child is no longer gifted. It means your child no longer needs services above and beyond the AP classes, the IB program, the extracurriculars that they are more interested in, the this, the that, the whatever. We don't exit kids just because of, you know, some kind of fluke or anything. We come to a meeting with a bank of data that says your child no longer needs the services that are provided, and we also don't have a little skinny stream of services. We have a wide range of things that are available for students who need more than is available in the regular curriculum. Could we do a better job of that? Probably, but we worked very, very hard on it, and the person who took my place, Ms. Strang, has picked up that, along with some of the teachers from Hamilton County have picked up that and are working very, very hard to make sure that that second prong of eligibility is adhered to. And I agree with the idea that we don't need to have gifted just be a crown that you wear around. We need gifted to be for the child who needs more than is offered in the regular curriculum. So I just wanted to provide that. We have schools that have extremely strong and rigorous programs, and guess what? There are still kids within those schools who need more than is available in that program. So I just wanted to add that on.
My name is Lisa D'Souza, and I've taught in 2 gifted programs in the state, vastly different student populations.
And one of the things that I do think that needs to be reflected upon is the thing that you said about portability. It is very difficult for a student to come from one part of the state and identified gifted, get to another part of the state, oh no, retested, don't meet the criteria based on how that particular system is seeing gifted. And the one thing that we really never quite remember about gifted is the emotional need part of it. Because in high school, for your average gifted student, and I'll bet there is an average gifted student, they're also individual, but a lot of them, their needs can be met just by, AP, IB. I totally understand that. My son was one of those. But some of the students that I taught in Williamson County, it was the emotional part that they needed, just that check-in kind of counseling thing, because the world is sometimes a difficult place when you're a gifted teenager. And I cannot stress that enough, just as an anecdotal. There were 5 outstanding gifted students that later on in their 20s all overdosed, because I think that they didn't have the skills to help their giftedness work in the real world. They weren't, the achieving gifted. So I also, I didn't really see that in any part of the revision, is the emotional need that some gifted kids, not all gifted kids, but some gifted kids have. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that wishes to comment but did not have a chance to do so?
Just quick clarification question. Tell us again how long you'll be taking written comments?
Until November 1st.
And how will the recording be available?
It'll be available on our website, the State Board's website. Again, www.tn.gov/S as in state, B as in board, E as in education, SBE. Okay, well, I would like to thank everybody who took the time to come out here. I know some people have traveled from other counties and, from Chattanooga. I appreciate you coming to share your thoughts, especially as a parent of a special education child. I certainly appreciate everything that you guys do. And we thank you for your comments. They were well thought out, well researched, and we will certainly consider them in our decision-making process. Again, please continue to submit written comments. Reach out if you have any questions. And if there are no further comments and no further business, I will adjourn this hearing. Thank you.